my pleasure to be back with you again and to speak this morning. And because I know you're all really posh at West End Baptist Church, you're always smart, you always dress really well. I thought today, as it's my last time, I'd wear my dog collar for you, my clerical collar. So I might not be speaking for a while, so you'll never ever see me wear it again. But as a one-off, as a special, I thought I'd wear it for you. Just in case I don't see you for a little while. This morning we're going to look at the book of Daniel. It's a most wonderful book. It's an incredible story. If we get time, we're going to read Daniel chapter 3 and Daniel chapter 6. And I'm going to jump all around the Bible as well. So I hope you're ready this morning. I'm going to work you really hard in the time we've got. But I think God's got a great message for you. I certainly hope so. Anyway, this morning what we want to look at is these two stories in particular that you will know really well from when you were in the little Sunday schools. The story of Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, or Abednego. Make the bed, shake the bed, go to bed. That's how you remember those people. The story of these guys getting thrown into a fiery furnace. And then also the story of Daniel being thrown into a den of lions. Stories that you know really well, and a sermon I can do in 10 seconds. Are you ready? Are you ready for the message in 10 seconds? Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego were thrown into a fiery service, but God saved them. Daniel was thrown into a lion's den, but God saved him. Amen. That's pretty much the story, isn't it? You know it so well. But is there more to it? Is there more to these stories that we know so well from when we were young? I'm going to say that there is. Isn't it a strange sort of thing if you think about it? These stories we teach to our children in Sunday school about throwing people into a fire, about throwing people into lions who are hungry. Why on earth we think as Christians that's a good thing to tell our children, I don't know. But is there more to these stories than that? I want to say that there is. I want to say that what these stories teach us is about suffering. How we face suffering as Christians. Daniel chapter 3 is actually a story about how do we respond to unintentional state oppression. Daniel chapter 6, when he's thrown into the lion's den, is how do we respond to intentional state oppression. Let me read the rest of Daniel chapter 3 to you. We went up to verse 19. And so these guys had been hauled before Nebuchadnezzar. They hadn't bowed down to this statue. Let's read from verse 19. Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, and his attitudes towards them changed. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans and other clothes, were bound and thrown into that blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers and took up Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, certainly, O king. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of God. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes weren't scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble. For no other God can save in this way than the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Before we get to Daniel, what on earth is going on in this passage? Well, actually, let's go back to the start. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 90 feet high, 9 feet wide, and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Now, I don't know how high 90 feet is. I imagine this ceiling, what do you reckon? More than that? About the same or even higher? Whatever it was a huge statue, not quite as big as the Colossus of Rhodes, but it was a vast statue made of gold. Why did he create it? It was for political reasons, not religious reasons. You see, Babylon at this time was a disparate empire, and Nebuchadnezzar was trying to rally together the troops. He was trying to gel together all the disparate regions of the kingdom, trying to get people to come and to bow down as if there was unity, trying to get all of the voters on one side, you might say. And so he gets this thing created, and then if I was speaking to you in Hebrew today, verse 2 is actually a poem. And if I'm to do it justice to you, I'm going to rap it. Are you ready? He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincials to come. And then a little bit later, the rap continues in the Hebrew, verse 8. As soon as you hear the sound of the horn and the flute and the zither and the lyre and the harp and the pipes and all kind of music, you must fall down and worship the image. We don't get that when we read it in English, but that's what it's saying in the Hebrew. Exactly that. In fact, there's Jewish humour going on here. The problem with Jewish humour, it's not funny. Well, if you were Jewish, you would read that and you would laugh. Oh yeah, the writer's making a rap out of this ridiculous idea that they're calling the people of God to worship a foreign statue. The people of God would never do that. And in fact, Nebuchadnezzar knew that. He knew that he lived in a polytheistic, which means many gods society. He wasn't asking everyone to give up their gods and to bow down and worship him. No, it was more an act of sort of state unification. He didn't really care if Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego worshipped the one true God, because in the society he was used to, people worshipped all types of gods. All he was interested in is, will you vote for me at the next election? And the way I'm going to unify you is to build a great big statue, and I'm going to call you all together, and that would be a great thing. But, and there's always a but, the trouble is, he let the mob start to dictate to him. There was a crowd of sycophants. Say sycophant to someone, it's a wonderful word, sycophant. Creep. People who were after their own interests and were ready to manipulate the king to gain power. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You've issued a decree, O king, that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the bagpipes, the piano, whatever it might be, must fall down. And whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into the fire." But there's some Jews whom you've set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. They pay no attention to you, O king. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold that you've set up. Verse 13, furious with rage. In fact, the Hebrew says his face was distorted. Sort of strange. His cheeks were all over the place. He became livid. And it was normal in this time for dictators to be livid a lot. And when dictators were livid, they killed people a lot. It's what happened then. You just have to accept it. It's a different society. But he'd been influenced by this group. He hadn't intended for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to have to go in front of a fire. He was manipulated. In fact, he didn't really want them because he'd invested in these people. He'd trained them. He'd taken them when he'd taken captive Israel, fed them the best food, trained them. In fact, they were pretty good at running his kingdom, at putting together laws, at provinces, governors. In fact, it would be ludicrous to get rid of these guys. They're so useful. But Nebuchadnezzar listened to the mob. And my first challenge for you today is, are there people in your lives who you are listening to that you shouldn't be? Is there a tendency for someone somewhere to be manipulating you? Is there a group of people who haven't got your best interests at heart, but have in fact got their own agenda and are using you to do something you really don't want to? Maybe that's something to think about. But anyway, they were thrown into this fire. Probably the same fiery furnace that was used to create this massive gold statue. We don't know. Turn to chapter 6, where I'll read it to you. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom, with 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now Daniel so distinguished himself amongst the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom, another useful servant. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They couldn't find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, "We'll never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God." So the administrators and the satraps went as a group to the king and said, "O King Darius, live forever." The royal administrators, and here's the wrap again, the prefects, the satraps, the advisors, the governors, they've all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to any god or man during the next 30 years, except to you, O king, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, O king, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered, in accordance with the laws of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. Now, a law of the Medes of the Persians was like the highest possible level law. Not family court or state court or supreme court or European Court of Human Rights. It was the top, unrevocable. They had to put a law in place. Now, when Daniel learned the decree had been published, he went home to the upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God just as he'd done before. Then these 3 men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. "Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days anyone who prays to any god or man except to you, O king, would be thrown into the lion's den?" The king answered, "The decree stands." But moving on then, they said to the king, "Daniel's one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day." When the king heard this, he was distressed, trying to make every effort to save Daniel, but he couldn't. And in the end, verse 16, so the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." So in chapter 3, we have the consequences of unintentional state oppression. Laws have happened, and it's not great for a believer. Chapter 6, a law has been created specifically to stop your worship. I would imagine in Canada today, most of the challenges we would face would be unintentional acts of state oppression rather than enforced you cannot practice and believe. Yet around the world today there's probably 200 million believers in countries where you cannot believe. To be found like Daniel will mean persecution. This is what these chapters are about, persecution. If the first point was to listen out to the voices that are surrounding you, the second point is this: storms whip up in your life unexpectedly. Change can come into your life without you even expecting it, without you knowing it. Scripture talks a lot about storms blowing up. A storm blew up for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. A storm blew up for Daniel. And the storm could blow up today. We don't know what today holds for any of us. Yet Bible clearly teaches us that as a believer, when we journey with Jesus, we're in three stages. We're either in the calm before a storm, we're either in a storm, or we're coming out of a storm. Let's hope and pray that for most of us in this room today, we're in the calm before a storm. Because that's a lovely place to be. And while you're in that place, that is when you need to practice your discipline. You need to practice your Christian spirituality. You need to be able to communicate and have a faith experience with God at that time, because it's easier to do that when you go into a storm and be able to respond to the storm. If you're only going to pray to God when things get tough, then you're going to be less effective in able to cope in those tough times. Isn't it interesting that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel were able to cope in this new situation that life had thrown at them? And the reason is that they had practiced the presence of God regularly, consistently, when the good times were happening, when they were the flavour of the month, when they were being promoted for doing the good stuff of running the kingdom. So when the storm came, they were prepared for it. Are you doing your homework each day of living as a Christian for Jesus? Let me encourage you this morning, do it if it's a good time in your life. If you're actually in a storm at the moment, then let me encourage you in this chapter, but I want to flick to a couple more places, and time is going short, but let me take you to Matthew 7. Matthew 7 verses 24 to 27. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine, that's Jesus, and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as a teacher of the law. Flip with me again into Mark chapter 4, verse 35. Jesus calms a storm. That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side," leaving the crowd behind. They took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall or a storm came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. That's a lot. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." I find those two stories fascinating. There's these two houses, these two builders, they've got their lovely houses, and it was all sunny, life was going well, it was the calm before the storm. All of a sudden, whoosh! The rain comes, the wind comes, the things in life come. The phone call from the doctor saying that they found a lump on your breast. The phone call from the bank manager saying your assets have just been frozen. There's phone call from so-and-so that so-and-so has just been taken into prison. All of a sudden, life can change. A storm can come over us and take us off guard. How do we respond? I want to encourage us to be like the man who built his house on a rock. What is that rock? It's on Jesus. It's getting that situation, no matter how bad it is, no matter what it is, and saying, Jesus, I want to trust this with you. I can't do anything about it. There's no point in me worrying about it. Worry doesn't change a thing. But I'm going to give it to you because you are the God who's in control. Or you can try and deal with it on your own. But if you put it on your foundation, there's a good chance that you're not going to be able to cope. And there's a good chance that you will crash down. The storm in Mark is really interesting. Because Jesus had just sent his disciples out on the boat to cross over the sea. They'd left the crowd behind. And then this furious squall came up. The waves broke out over the boat. Interesting how Jesus reacts. He's asleep. Doesn't bother him. Yet the disciples are panicking. The disciples are thinking they're going to drown. And that's our human reaction to storms. If we're not careful, it can overwhelm us. If we're not careful, we start to panic. We start to think the worst. Jesus gets up. What does he do? Does he panic? Does he run around? Does he scream? Does he shout? No! He says, be still. Quiet. Peace. Storm dies down. Interestingly, when they get off the boat, Jesus performs a miracle in the life of a man who lives in the tombs, in the cemeteries. A man who's been possessed by thousands of demons called Legion. You see, sometimes storms crop up in your life because you're on the cusp of something great. You're at the point of walking into victory with Jesus, and the enemy hates that, and therefore an unexpected storm crops up. If you're experiencing an unusual storm at the moment, maybe it's because you're near to your miracle. Maybe it's because you're near to the thing that God has promised you getting fulfilled. If you're in a storm, let me encourage you to act as Jesus did. To not panic, to be calm, not to be like his disciples who panicked. Let me encourage you to be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel, and how they responded to the storms and the sudden changes in their life. Let's go back to chapter 3. So Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. His attitude towards them changed. He ordered this super hot furnace, so hot it killed some of his armies. And they got thrown in. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the fourth looks like a son of God. Jesus is with you no matter what you are facing. If you want to get theological about this, we don't know if this is a theophany, which is an Old Testament revelation of God. We don't know if this fourth person in the fire was a pre-incarnate vision of Jesus. We don't know if it was Daniel even. There's all sorts of speculation about who this is. But God is in control of every situation you find yourself in. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego trusted in God. No matter what situation they found themselves in, they trusted in Him. Daniel trusted in God. These were hungry lions in Daniel chapter 6. We know that because once Daniel had been rescued, you can read the chapter later, he threw in those advisors and they got eaten. God sent an angel. And here's the sort of crux of the matter. Are we going to trust God? You see, God might save us from the fiery furnace. He might save us from the den of lions. Or you look at Hebrews chapter 11. And in Hebrews chapter 11, some people did get eaten by lions. Some people didn't get saved from a fiery furnace. Yet throughout they trusted in God. And if you can get to that point in your faith life and walk with Jesus that you will trust God no matter what happens, then I think you've got it. Unlike even the disciples who hadn't got it when the storm broke out. God is in complete control. Nothing takes God by surprise. It takes us by surprise. And that's why I'm telling you to do your homework now. If you're in that car before a storm, get your reading in, get the armour of God on, get praying, get trusting, get to believe God in the good times so when the bad times come, you'll be prepared. Build your house on the rock because you never know what tomorrow will bring. But if tomorrow does bring a storm, if the state suddenly says that we can't worship on a Sunday anymore, that it's illegal to be a Christian and we must bow down to whoever or whatever, then trust God that He's in control. I want to end this morning by praying for anyone who's in a storm. And I'd actually like to invite you to the front for prayer. There's nothing to be embarrassed about, and I don't even need to know what it is. But if you feel that you're in a fiery furnace today, if you feel that actually you're in a situation where the lion's looking at you, where the face of the king is distorted against you, where the waves are whipped up and you don't know what to do, I want to pray with you that you find peace. I want to pray with you that you find Jesus in the midst of your storm. I want to pray with you that you will get trust in Him. We don't know if God will bring you out of this or not. But I can tell you something for sure. That God is always working His purposes and they are good. We think of Joseph. He was sold into slavery by his brothers. He went to work for Potiphar, got falsely accused of rape and got thrown into prison for 2 years. And at the end of his life, his brothers came before him miraculously. And his testimony was this. Genesis 50 verse 20. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. It says in Romans that we know that in all things, God is at work to fulfill His purposes. Amen. So if we can have another song or not, that'd be wonderful. And then David will come and close. But if you want prayer during that last time, can I encourage you to come and sit with me on the front? And I'll just lead you in a simple prayer and work my way along. If you don't want to, that's fine, but I want to make that available because I know that some people here this morning will be facing a tough situation. Amen. Thank you for listening.